Hello, friends. It was December 24th, 1971. Lanza Airlines Flight 508 was departing from Lima, the capital of Peru. On this very plane, 86 passengers were seated, and the plane was heading over the Amazon jungle toward the city of Pucallpa. The first half hour of the journey was normal. The crew served breakfast to the passengers, the pilots talked about their families, and everyone was happy, because tomorrow was Christmas and everyone was excited to see their home, relatives, and the celebrations. But suddenly, as the plane began descending to land, dark clouds spread over it. Signs of a terrifying storm appeared. The pilots decided that they could not avoid this storm. The plane flew straight into the heart of it. A few moments later, darkness surrounded everything. Lightning struck angrily. The plane shook violently, then shook even more intensely. The turbulence became so severe that passengers' luggage was thrown out of the overhead compartments and fell on people's heads. Screams and fear spread inside the plane. This continued for nearly 20 minutes. And then suddenly, at an altitude of 21,000 feet, lightning struck the plane's right wing. The wing caught fire, and a few seconds later, the plane lost its right wing, and part of the left wing also broke off. Only 15 minutes away from landing in Pucallpa, at around 10,000 feet, the plane began breaking apart. Air traffic control workers on the ground suddenly noticed the plane's signal disappear from the radar. Some people hoped that maybe the plane had made an emergency landing, but very quickly it was confirmed that the plane had completely crashed. After this, the largest search operation in Peru's history began. A few days later, when rescue teams reached the depths of the Amazon jungle, pieces of the plane were visible in every direction. Passengers' belongings were hanging from the branches of trees. Christmas gifts were scattered as if someone had decorated the trees. Searching continued for several days, but no living person was found. Everyone believed that after falling from 10,000 feet, there was no chance of survival. But that wasn't true. The world remained unaware. One passenger had survived. In the middle of the deep Amazon jungle, far from any human settlement, a 17-year-old girl was still alive. Her name was Julianne Kepke. It was an astonishing miracle, but the problem was that she was alone, injured, and had no sign of help nearby. No one was coming to search for her because the rescue teams had stopped the search operation. Her family and everyone else considered her dead like the other passengers. Julianne had actually boarded this plane with her mother, Maria. They were going to the Panguana Biological Research Center in the Amazon, a center built by Julianne's parents because both of them were zoologists. The original plan was for the family to gather together for Christmas. They were supposed to leave a few days earlier, but Julianne took the last-minute flight because of her school's prom and graduation. Due to the holidays, all other good flights were sold out. Only Lanza Airlines remained. Julianne's father had repeatedly warned them not to travel with this airline. It had a very bad reputation. People used to joke, "Lanza no, Lanza de panza," meaning the plane rolls over your stomach. Several of its planes had previously crashed, and this flight was their last option. It was a turboprop plane, a Lockheed L-188 Electra model, built to fly over planes because its wings were very rigid and could not withstand severe turbulence. But the passengers on the plane were told none of this. And now the plane was flying over the Andes Mountains, a dangerous task for this aircraft. The wings of this plane were not flexible like other planes. They were attached so rigidly to the body that they had no flexibility. This is why the plane could not endure turbulence and had been retired years earlier in the United States. The passengers had not been informed that this plane should not fly over mountains, yet this flight flew over the Andes, a task that was dangerous from the very start. When lightning struck and the accident occurred, Julianne was sitting in the second-to-last row of the plane, in window seat 19F. This very three-seat row detached from the plane's body due to the severe impact. But because Julianne had her seatbelt fastened, the seat stayed attached to her, and she fell with it from an altitude of 10,000 feet. What happened next? It was an unbelievable miracle in the history of humanity. Julianne fell along with her seat, falling through the wind. Instead of the plane shaking and passengers screaming, now only the sound of the air could be heard. The wind pressed the seatbelt into her waist so forcefully that it became difficult for her to breathe. Below, the darkness of the Amazon jungle could be seen. The trees were so dense that the ground was invisible, like rows and rows of broccoli fields. Julianne lost consciousness while falling. When she regained awareness, she saw that she had landed on the forest floor. The date was December 25th, Christmas morning. It had rained all night, her clothes were covered in mud, and Julianne had been unconscious the entire night. When she came back to awareness, she tried several times to stand, but each time she fainted again. After a few failed attempts, she finally managed to stand properly. When she stood up, she realized that one of her collarbones was broken, her ribs were severely bruised, and she had wounds on her right shoulder and left leg. One eye was so swollen that it could not open, and in the other eye only a thin line was visible. Her glasses were gone, she had lost one boot, and she was wearing a harness. At this point, a question comes to your mind. How did she survive a fall from such a height? There were 3 miraculous reasons for this. 1. Updrafts beneath the storm. As the wind blew violently from the ground toward the sky, anything falling was lifted upward. This same wind slowed Julianne's falling speed. 2. The swirling motion of the seat. Her seat twisted rapidly through the air, like a helicopter rotor. This twisting further reduced her falling speed. 3. The large leaves and branches of the Amazon trees. The large leaves and branches formed a natural net that acted like a soft cushion, protecting Julianne from a direct impact. Of course, aside from all this, luck also played a major role. Which way the seat turned, which trees it hit, which part of the body was up. These all determined life or death. Even with all this, surviving was so rare that its significance can be understood by the fact that all the other passengers had died, only Julianne survived. But the real danger for Julianne was just beginning. In the heart of the deep Amazon jungle, she was alone. Her arms and legs were scratched, and she screamed for her mother. But no one answered. The only sounds were frogs, insects, and birds. However, there was one piece of good news for Julianne. This jungle was not new to her. She had spent 3 years with her zoologist parents at the Panguana Research Station. She knew which animals were poisonous, which plants were dangerous, and what to do in emergencies. She knew that in such a dire situation, fear would not help. She had to think. A few hours later, she felt a little better and could move around normally. The first thing she did was search for her mother and the other passengers. She screamed, "Where are you, Mom?" But no answer came. Sometimes she even heard the sound of rescue helicopters, but the jungle was so dense that seeing them was nearly impossible. Gradually, she realized that she was truly alone and everything had to be done by herself. Her primary needs for survival, water and food. She used her mind. She drank raindrops from the leaves to quench her thirst. Then she began searching for food. Everyone thinks that a lot of food can be found in such jungles, but the truth is that the Amazon is so dense that sunlight rarely reaches the ground, so very little grows there. The only food available nearby was palm fruits, which grew at heights of 20 meters. Climbing the trees for them was very dangerous. Julianne knew she had to plan carefully before attempting to climb, as it could be extremely risky. At first, she spotted mushrooms in the forest, but she suspected they might be poisonous, so she did not touch them. Later, she saw an Italian fruitcake box that had fallen from the plane, but it was completely soaked from the rain and inedible. A little later, she found a package of candies. There were only 30 candies. She said to herself, "I don't know how many days I'll survive on just these candies." So she decided to eat only a few candies each day. The watch she had was a gift from her grandmother. Now her toughest decision was which direction to go. She wandered around the crash site for several hours until suddenly she heard the sound of dripping water. She followed the sound and, among the plants, discovered a very small source of water emerging from the mud. This was her first glimmer of hope. Julianne's father had told her, "If you ever get lost in the jungle, follow the running water." Small drops will form a stream, the stream will lead to a small river, and eventually it will reach a large river. And on the banks of the large river, there will definitely be a human settlement. So she decided to follow this one plan. But this was the Amazon jungle. There were 8-foot-long alligators, poisonous snakes, dangerous spiders, and other wild animals. And here was a 17-year-old girl, completely alone, without knowing where she was going or if anyone would find her. Following water is easy in theory, but not in practice. Water sometimes flows under fallen trees, thick bushes, and loose rocks. The jungle was so dense that sometimes she had to cut through plants to move forward. She hadn't gone far before darkness fell. She checked the time. It was 6 p.m. Now her greatest struggle began, surviving the night in this wild jungle. At night, any wild animal could attack easily. Julianne knew she had to sleep in a place where a large rock or tree would shield her from attacks from behind. Her father had also taught her how to start a fire, but the rain was heavy, everything was soaked, and making a fire was impossible. Exhausted and in pain, she slept deeply, but fortunately in a relatively safe spot. When she woke up the next day, she had no strength left, but she knew if she wanted to survive, she had to keep moving. On her way, she noticed a terrifyingly large spider. The Goliath bird eater, the largest spider in the world, so big that it eats small birds. But Julianne kept her distance. She spent the entire day walking along the river, no new food, no sign of anything. By the end of the third day, she found the first sign of the plane crash. A burnt turbine with black scorch marks on one side. She could still hear the rescue helicopters. But there was nothing she could do. She could only hear the sounds, but no one could see her. There was no way for her to signal for help. It was the third day of her journey, and as evening approached, her wristwatch stopped working. On the fourth day, Julianne heard the cries of vultures. These were the birds that always come to feed on dead animals. She realized that there must be a corpse nearby. She saw several seats from the plane lying in one place, 3 people still strapped into their seatbelts. They had fallen headfirst into the ground with such force that their heads were embedded 3 feet into the earth and their legs were sticking up. The scene was terrifying. Julianne became very frightened for moments. One of the 3 was a woman. She feared that it might be her mother. Slowly, she stepped forward, lifted a piece of wood, and tried to see the woman's feet. When she got closer, she saw that the woman had nail polish on her fingernails. This gave her some relief because her mother never wore nail polish. She searched around to see if there were any other dead or injured people. But besides the plane's metal wreckage, there was nothing. So she continued on her path toward the river. More days, more suffering. Days passed one after another. She found no more food. She lost all sense of time. She didn't know what day it was, nor what time it was. Each day felt the same, and each night was long and dark. Her mind repeated one thing: follow the water, follow the water. Gradually, the small streams merged into a larger stream, and that larger stream became a small river. More days, more suffering. Days passed one after another. She found no more food. She lost all sense of time. She didn't know what day it was, nor what time it was. Each day felt the same, and each night was long and dark. Her mind repeated one thing: follow the water, follow the water. Gradually, the small streams merged into a larger stream, and that larger stream became a small river. But after so many days, hunger had become unbearable. All the remaining candies were gone. She thought about eating the inner parts of coconuts or palm trees, but she had no knife, no sharp tool. She had no way to catch fish, nor could she cook any plants. So she decided to drink only river water. The minerals in the water gave her a temporary feeling of fullness, but the hunger soon returned. She felt extremely weak, hopeless, and broken. She did not know how many more days she could survive in this condition. The miracle of the 6th day. On the 6th day, she heard the call of a particular bird. The sound was very familiar to her. It was the Hoatzin bird, a bird that only nests along large rivers. The sound rekindled hope in her heart. She hurriedly quickened her steps. She saw that the stream was now joining a larger river. But reaching the river was not easy. Thick bushes and fallen tree debris blocked the way. Crossing seemed impossible. So she was forced to turn back, pass through the dense undergrowth, and spent several hours doing this until she finally reached the river. The last hope for rescue. The river was about 30 feet wide. After many days, Julianne saw the clear color of the sky for the first time, free from the shade of the trees. But still, there were no humans around. She could hear tea. Julianne realized what this meant. The search for rescue had ended. Once again, her morale broke. Until now, her goal had been to reach the riverbank at any cost. But now that she had reached the river, the feeling of her isolation became alive as well. This jungle, stretching thousands of kilometers, was desolate. No humans lived there, and there was no one to save her. It seemed to her that the chance of surviving here was zero. She was about to give up when she remembered her father's words. "Where there is a river, there will be people too." This sentence renewed her hope. She told herself, "As long as I follow the riverbank, one day I will surely reach people." With this final hope, her journey continued. Days passed, but with each day her condition worsened. Flies laid eggs on the wounds of her hands, and now those eggs had hatched into tiny maggots. These maggots could only be removed with alcohol or kerosene, but she had neither. The only tool she had was a thin white fingernail. She used that nail to try to remove the maggots, but they had burrowed so deep under her skin that it was impossible to remove them. She feared that if the wound became infected, she might have to amputate her own hand. On top of this, the upper part of her back was severely burned. Her skin was gradually peeling, blood was flowing, and there was nothing she could do. So she did one thing. She followed the riverbank and nothing else. Later, she thought, why follow the riverbank when she could go down into the river itself? Maybe the current would carry her forward more easily. She threw herself into the river and moved along with the flowing water. For hours and hours, she drifted in the water until suddenly she thought she saw the roof of a house, and then she heard the sound of a chicken. But both were hallucinations. Her starving, weak, and exhausted mind was creating illusions. As evening approached, she would get out of the river and find a place to shelter for the night. In the morning, she would jump back into the river. She repeated this dangerous method for several days. One day, while lying on the sand of the riverbank, a large female came and approached her in an attacking posture. But here, once again, her knowledge of the jungle helped her. She knew that this type of alligator does not attack in water, so she immediately threw herself back into the river. But the cold water, hunger, and exhaustion grew worse. She even saw small calves, wild animals, and other creatures. This was not a good sign because such animals live in regions where humans are absent. By the arrival of the 10th day, she had almost given up on everything. She believed she would not be rescued anymore. Another long day passed drifting in the river. Evening came, the sun set, and darkness spread. She pulled herself out of the river to rest a little. But suddenly, her eyes widened. In front of her stood a large boat. She doubted. Could this be another hallucination? She blinked her eyes several times. The boat remained there. She approached it, touched it. It was real. A real boat. Beside the boat was a small path leading upward. She gathered the last bit of strength in her body and climbed that path. At the top was a small hut. She looked inside. No one was there. But in the middle there was gasoline. Julianne used a thin tube to draw gasoline out and poured it directly onto the painful wounds of her hand. She had one goal: to remove the maggots that had burrowed deep beneath her skin. But it was like pouring fire onto flesh. When the gasoline touched the wound, the pain was so intense that her scream reached the bottom of her heart. The maggots, trying to escape the burning gasoline, burrowed even deeper into the flesh. Slowly they began coming out. She pulled them out one by one, removing them, counting them. Her heart trembled with each one. There were 30 maggots inside. 30! When she removed them all, she firmly decided that she would now wait inside this hut for people to return. Night fell. Morning came. But no one arrived. She asked herself, Should I go further or should I die right here? But her body had no strength left at all. She remained sitting right there, exhausted, hopeless, half dead. But with the darkness of evening, suddenly she heard some sounds. Human voices. She told herself that maybe it was another hallucination. But no, 3 men came out of the jungle. When they saw Julianne's condition, they all stepped back in fear. A pale girl with terrified eyes, torn clothes, and wounds covered in blood. To them, she looked like some evil spirit of the jungle. In the Amazon, there is a legend about a giant anaconda called Yaku Mama, the mother of waters. They became convinced. This might be that evil spirit. With the last bit of remaining energy, Julianne spoke softly. I'm a survivor of the Lanza flight. My name is Julianne. They were shocked. They said, that flight, everyone on that flight had died. If you're alive, then you are the only one who survived. This news broke her heart. Reality came back to her, meaning her mother had not survived. She had made this whole journey hoping that her mother was alive. But now the truth stood in front of her. Her mother was gone. These 3 men were not actually traveling there. The rain had gotten heavy, so they had taken shelter in that hut. They gave Julianne a shirt, pants, food, farina, and cleaned her wounds. A little later, 2 more people arrived. The next day, they all took Julianne to a village. When the villagers saw her, everyone was frightened. The blood vessels in her eyes had all burst. Her eyes were red like blood. There they cleaned her wounds again and disinfected them. Then they transported her by a plane to Kocha, where doctors gave her full treatment. A few days later, Julianne, relieved, healed, alive, returned home. 11 days, alone at the edge of death in the Amazon, and she survived. For the world, this was unbelievable. A 17-year-old girl who had fallen from 10,000 feet and survived 11 days fighting the horrors of the jungle. Julianne left the Amazon, but the Amazon never left her heart. She studied biology like her mother, and dedicated her life to protecting animals and the rainforest. In the year 2000, after her father's death, she became the director of the Panguana Research Station, the same center her parents had built. Today, in 2025, Julianne Koepke is 71 years old, alive, and still active. In 2010, she said that because of this incident, she still sees frightening dreams even after many years. But one question always troubles her. Why me? Why only me? But the truth has one answer. She did not give up. She used her knowledge, her parents' teachings, and her own courage. She created ways to save herself. Investigations revealed that 14 other people had also survived the initial crash, but they died waiting for rescue. But Julianne, she fought until her last breath. And that was the difference. And from this story, we learn one lesson. No matter how hard things get, never give up.